Hello ladies and gentlemen and welcome to the Film Brits podcast. I'm your host Trilbee, the Guy Fawkes of film criticism. I have no idea what that makes me. I was going to have this podcast out yesterday for Halloween and make it slightly spookily themed. However, what happened was what I did not quite anticipate, stupidly I did not anticipate, is that every 5 minutes someone would be knocking at the door for trick-or-treating, meaning I would just be continually interrupted, meaning I could not get the podcast out, meaning I had to delay it by a day. So, November 1st, it's no longer spooky, so the next thing is Bonfire Night in a few days' time, which makes me the Guy Fawkes of... You get the workaround, it's not fun when I explain the joke. I'm just going to start off the podcast just establishing a couple of things. One, it's been a bad habit of mine when recording podcasts or recording anything to be umming and ahhing. I know already in the past 50 seconds or the past minute I've done it twice. Very subtly done it twice, but I've noticed myself doing it, and I'm now going to try and make an explicitly conscious effort to not do it. It's a bad habit. I apologise if there may be a brief moment's silence, but that silence is because I'm trying to not go and ah, etc, etc. Secondly, what I would like to say is thank you to my patrons. I'd like to thank all of you who have been supporting the production process for the short film Before He Wakes. We have one more day left of shooting and post-production has already begun. Some of the footage is looking pretty awesome, if I do say so myself. I was showing my fiancée, who's also the special effects makeup artist on the film, I showed her some of the early footage, and while there was the occasional that footage is a bit too bright, in other words, I hadn't done the colour correction, I had not done the contrast on it yet, she said to me that looked a lot better than I thought it would, and I have no idea how to take that sort of response, but I'm guessing it's relatively positive. Because there's still one more day of filming, the campaign technically is still going on, so if you would still like to continue supporting Before He Wakes, if you'd like to just pledge for another month, then just continue what you are doing if you're a patron. But also for the final month, a role has come up if you would like to be in the film. If you pledge at least part of the $10 tier for the month of November 2017, then you will be entered into a draw to be a part of the film. Now, how does this happen, you may ask? Well, there is a scene in the movie where a character is on the phone to somebody else, and we need somebody to fill in that voice role. In order to qualify for the position, you would need to... It doesn't matter what part of the world you are from, as long as you speak English and can do an English accent. I'll accept anywhere from England. It could be a Scottish accent, it could be an Irish accent, just somewhere on this island that actually passes for an English accent. You also need a decent quality microphone, not incredible, maybe something just slightly above your bog standard laptop microphone or computer microphone. You will be on the other side of a phone, so there will be some slight alterations done to your voice, so the quality is not incredibly paramount, but if you can get a decent quality microphone, or maybe sometimes even your phone could be fine. Just test your phone quality and see how it goes. That will be fine as well. And also just be able to send and record the footage, really. I use Audacity to record this podcast and to record my review audio. Audacity is a free program. Audacity is pretty awesome. You could just send me a WAV file or an MP3 file, whatever works for you. Send me that file and then you'll get a credit in the film. You will be one of the main credits as well, on top of your credit for just supporting the film. Regardless of what you pledge, you will end up as a credit in the film, but if you win the draw, if you win the voice actor draw, then you will actually get a credited voice part in the movie. That's actually quite a key important plot point in the movie as well, which is pretty interesting and awesome, and you could even put it on a voice acting show reel, or if that's what you're wanting to do, if you're wanting to get into acting or voice acting, it's an actual credit, so that's pretty exciting, isn't it? I like to think so. This is me trying not to and ah, and I'm really struggling, but hopefully by the time this podcast is over, it will have become second nature. So if you would like a voice role in the short film Before He Wakes, you just simply go to the $10 tier on Patreon, just for this month, because for this one-off payment for November 2017, and at the end of November I will do a draw, and then we will sort out getting your voice acting role in the movie, and that should be pretty awesome. So thank you very much for your continued support, and let's delve into the actual topics at hand. First, let's open up with the Share the Love segment. Now, Share the Love is a segment because there's so much negativity in the world, there's so much pessimism, there's so much trash and garbage out there on the internet. let's try and throw some good support to something that's a worthwhile endeavour, or someone whose work I appreciate. And this is actually one that is kind of quite close to my heart in a way, not directly, but in terms of principle, this is quite close to my heart. This week on Share the Love, I would like to give a shout out to the folks over at Doctor Who Velocity, which is a Doctor Who fan film that was released on October 31st, just yesterday for Halloween, and it's a 12-minute fan film from America, of all places, where you have a female Doctor who travels back to the 1500s in her TARDIS in order to save England's first convicted witch, Agnes Waterhouse, and then there are consequences to her saving the witch and meddling with time, yada yada yada. It is a fan film, so of course you are not going to be getting 100% great production values or an incredibly polished production. There's a couple of weird camera filter effects during one sequence in a forest, which I just absolutely did not get. The TARDIS is looking quite barren. I have no idea why there is a skull in the opening vortex in the theme tune. However, it is still quite an admirable production. It's a 10-minute long story, so it doesn't quite delve into the topics that it's hoping to confront in terms of changing time and whether or not you should have saved this person, etc. But it is still a very admirable effort. It was directed and edited by Chris Phillips and written by Crystal Moore, and Crystal is the person who is playing the Doctor in this fan film. It's a pretty ambitious production. I did enjoy watching it. Crystal is a really interesting, charismatic presence as the Doctor. The sparse TARDIS actually did kind of grow on me after a while, and as with basically all fan films, it comes from a place of love and passion for the source material. So I will put a link in the description below to Doctor Who Velocity. Be sure to check it out if you're a Doctor Who fan, or if you are interested in anything outside of the official productions. It is a non-profit fan film, so please do not sue them, BBC. I know that you get very trigger happy with content ID and copyright. I know from experience, so just let them be, let them enjoy and have fun with their fan film, and be sure to check out Doctor Who Velocity. So last week was a pretty heavy topic in the podcast, mainly concerning the allegations made against Hollywood producer Harvey Weinstein and the creator of Honest Trailers and one of the heads of Screen Junkies, Andy Signore. So there was a lot to delve into there, a lot of heavy conversations and heavy debates had to be had. And things aren't actually getting any easier in terms of talking about movies and in terms of behaviour in Hollywood. For example, we had this whole Kevin Spacey thing a couple of days ago, and actually right now, as I'm recording this, I took a pause in the recording just to have a quick drink, and then I look on Facebook, and now I'm finding news from the Hollywood Reporter saying that 6 women, including Olivia Munn and Natasha Henstridge, have had sexual abuse allegations made to film producer Brett Ratner, producer and director Brett Ratner. So, yeah, Brett Ratner always kind of gave this persona of being an absolute hard-ass woman's man bro dude. It's a very, very obnoxious degrees and extents. So this news isn't particularly surprising, but let's see how the story plays out. It is still it's still a developing story, so let's see how this goes. But this is a conversation I think we're gonna keep on having for the foreseeable future, as more people and as more victims come forward and are brave enough to come forward to basically find justice for what was done to them in the industry. And it's not just a Hollywood problem, it's a societal problem when people are saying that, oh, it's not Hollywood, it's the Jews, or it's not the Jews, it's Hollywood. Like, for some reason the Jews just seem to find their way into this conversation in a derogatory way, and it's absolutely depressing to go on Twitter and on Facebook and to talk about these things, because for some reason the Jews keep on getting brought up, which is a very stupid thing. But let's just keep things light, as I requested to the patrons. This episode is going to be a patrons topic and question request episode, so I'm going to be delving into these topics that my patrons have very kindly sent me in order to lighten up the tone of the podcast for this episode, and maybe we can get to some more serious stuff next time, or let's just see where the conversation takes us, really. So the first question, I've got 2 of them, but the first one comes from Christoph, who says, I have a question. Is it possible to get into the film/TV industry without going to film school? Right now I'm studying English and history. Well, Christoph, congratulations on getting your English and getting accepted onto English and history. I'm assuming you're at university or at college. Either way, you still have to work your way there and get so you've done very well so far, and I'm incredibly happy for you. So for getting into the TV/film industry without going to film school, it absolutely is possible. You had a lot of people, for example, Quentin Tarantino was either a film school dropout or just a university dropout. He was one or the other. He did not complete a film style course, and now he's one of the most notorious and most famous directors in Hollywood. So it can be done. Provably, it has been done. You also have a lot of people who make their way up through the ranks in terms of acting, or through radio, or for voice acting, or for stand-up comedy, and then get into film and TV. They transition to another facet of the industry, so it still can be done. But in terms of just you're doing English and history and you want to either do some film-related work on the side, or you do want to completely sidestep and do a different career, do a different goal or different course in life, it still can be done, absolutely. What you need to do is that you need to find out what you want to do personally. Do you want to be a camera operator? Do you want to be a director? Do you want to be an assistant director? Do you want to be in the editing room? And no matter what you find, you will find entry-level positions, because you don't just make your way from... Even if you were working in film school, you do not graduate film school and all of a sudden become a director and land your first gig directing episodes of Coronation Street. Does not happen. You have to work your way up. The great thing, and also what could be considered a bit of a weakness in terms of getting into the industry in the first place, is that there is a almost tangible ladder in the TV and film industry. You do have to start from the bottom and work your way up, unless you happen to get a film grant and then you end up making a $50,000 short film or £50,000 short film or feature film, and then you get lucky at a film festival and stuff like that. But unless you come across a lot of money, or are born into money, or have an incredibly good contact, there is a ladder that you can climb to get your way to the top. So you have to start off, as, for example, as a runner, whether or not that is a production runner or a floor runner, or someone who just makes teas in an office, or someone who just answers the phone and works as a secretary. That is where you start off, and then after a couple of years you work your way up. If you want to go in the camera department, you work your way up to camera trainee, then camera assistant, and then there's a whole other ladder up from there. Then if you want to go into sound, you work as a sound assistant, then a boom operator, then maybe a sound mixer. If you want to be a director or an assistant director, after a couple of years you work your way up from being a floor runner to a third AD, to a second AD, to a first AD, or to a third and then to a first, because the second AD is primarily an office-based role. So you could hypothetically move your way from third to first if your interests are not in the office, if they're not in on-paper organisational skills, because the second AD is the person who's in the office, who organises the call sheet, who organises the schedules, who basically sorts out the logistics. And there are some people who want to work their way up the directorial ladder who do not have those sort of instincts or that sort of intuition, who would rather work with the actors and be more creative, or work with the crew. And in that case, it's perfectly reasonable to work your way up from being a third, then to a first AD. However, it's always fun to maybe dabble in a second AD role and then just see what takes your fancy. And if you would like to work your way up in terms of being a line producer or a production coordinator, you become a production runner or an office runner. After a couple of years, you work your way up to production secretary, then you work up to production coordinator, and you can always work your way up to line producer. Line producer sounds like a super duper official role because it has the word producer in it, but a line producer is not explicitly a creative role. A line producer is somebody who organises the finances and ensures that the production stays on budget. They have to sign off on almost every single cost that is made in that production office. They have to fill out a purchase form, and then they have to sign their name at the bottom of it to authorise a transaction so that they don't go over budget and they keep track of the budget. So that's a whole different department. If you want to be in the finance, you work your way up as a runner, then maybe as a... You might not even need to be a runner at first if you have experience in handling money. If you work in a bank, or if you work in an accounts department, you can actually sidestep to TV and film. And I know that they're always looking for accountants, so they're always looking for accountants. So that is actually a relatively, quote-unquote, relatively easy sidestep into that industry. But Christoph, what you want to do I don't know what you want to do in terms of getting into the TV and film industry. However, you can get up that ladder without going to film school. Film school can give you some knowledge and it can give you some contacts, but at the end of the day, it's all down to what you put into it. You can have somebody who graduates from film school with a first or like a first class honours degree or whatever, but because they don't have their own personal drive, or because they do not aspire, or because they do not attempt to find work, or they hope that work will land on their lap, they don't get anywhere. And that is where you have to make up the ground. You have to close the gap, close the distance. And what you're finding is that if you get a couple of runner jobs, a good CV with a good list of credits will speak more than an actual degree or a BA or a master's in TV and film. It's all down to practical experience. If you've got somebody at an interview, there's yourself with, let's say, 5 credits doing some daily work as a TV runner, and there's somebody who has just got out of film school, they're going to go with the person with the 5 credits unless that person at the interview does a really good job and you do a really, really bad job. It's all got to come down to personal experience. And I know that people have a issue saying, oh, well, they're just, when they do these what would you call them? It's these positive discrimination things where they say, we're looking for somebody who is non-white, or we're looking for females, or we're looking for somebody who's typically underrepresented in the industry. Some people from the outside who don't know anything about the industry and also don't know anything about society, but that's a whole other topic for another time, will say they were just given that role because of the colour of their skin, or their gender, or their background, or where they grew up. Whereas in reality, for TV and film, they're not that charitable. Yes, there will be grants and there will be outreach programs that will try and find some people from communities or from ethnic backgrounds or from genders that are traditionally not represented in certain departments. However, you still have to do the job well. Because TV and film, one day of shooting on a professional TV and film production can cost tens of thousands of pounds. They are not just going to throw somebody in there who has no idea what they're doing, will waste everyone's time, and could potentially waste tens of thousands of pounds just for the sake of being an SJW or whatever. That's not how it works. They still need someone who is capable of doing the job. They're going to value the professional experience. They're going to value the grit, the determination, the knowledge of the industry. That's what they're going to be looking for. They're going to be looking for somebody who is capable of doing the job. And if you do not go to film school, then it might be slightly harder to step onto that ladder, but not too much harder. It can still be done. What you need to do is you just need to apply or speak to local film companies around you, get involved in local TV. I do have a video on my YouTube channel, which is a audio segment from the Movie Mania podcast from maybe about a year and a half ago, where I talk about how to break into the TV and film industry. I would advise listening to that. Most of the advice would still apply regardless of whether or not you went to film school, but it can be done. The gap in terms of difficulty is very negligible in my opinion. Maybe being at film school or at a certain film school, such as the national, what's it called? It's like one of the big film schools in London. I forget the name off the top of my head. Maybe there's 1 or 2 film schools which will definitely give you a tangible increased employment probability, but for the most part it's not going to happen, and you just need to rely on your own will. And that is stuff that I talk about in that video, which I recommend you go watch. And also another question from Christoph, what about good and bad American adaptations of British TV shows / movies? Now these are things that I'm usually aware of, but I don't really have the free time to watch all of them. Off the top of my head, the good ones are when you get the UK version of The Office and then the US version of The Office, which is really what made Steve Carell a massive institution. I know that some of the roles that he did in the Apatow films, such as 40-Year-Old Virgin and Anchorman, they kind of put him on the map, but Steve Carell in The Office, the US version, is really what established him as a powerhouse comedic presence. And that show I actually think is better than the UK version. The UK version is a show that I can watch and enjoy, however I don't tend to laugh at it that much. The main reason I watch the UK Office is because I like the characters, I like the performances, I like the setup. I don't think Ricky Gervais is particularly funny in it. That's my personal comedic preferences. I think everyone else in that series is funny and engaging, except for Ricky Gervais. So that's one of the main things holding that series back for me. I enjoy watching the character arcs unfold and the relationships, but I don't really laugh that much. Whereas with The Office, I think I laugh all the time at that. I think that's really funny. Steve Carell's terrific. I enjoy the character arcs and the long-standing relationships. When Steve Carell left towards the end, it was really limping towards the finish line, I'm afraid. So when Steve Carell left, I would kind of advise people to stop watching. And then what you get after The Office is Parks and Recreation, which I think took the Office formula and absolutely perfected it. I think Parks and Recreation is The Office on speed and in like 20 times better, and I really loved the US Office. In terms of other adaptations, I have not seen Elementary, although I am told that it is more consistently good than the UK series Sherlock, which, yeah, they're both based off of Sherlock Holmes, so you can't really say that one is a direct US adaptation of the UK TV show, but they came out around the same time, and Sherlock was a huge show, and I think that it's pretty clear that the US was maybe capitalising on the success of Sherlock. I have not watched Elementary. I've seen clips of it. I think John Lee Miller and Lucy Liu seem to be, from what I've seen, a very good presence together, and I have been told that it is more consistently good. While it may not reach the heights of early Sherlock, it does not reach the depths of later Sherlock, and it sort of has it toes the middle ground in a much more consistent way than Sherlock did, which, depending on what you want from your serialised TV, could make it better or worse. I don't know. I really have no stake in that fight. There's also the US In-Betweeners, which is just terrible. I've watched 2 episodes of the US In-Betweeners. I think it was like the very first 2 episodes when it first came out. I have very little recollection of it. But what sticks out to me in terms of completely missing the point is their characterization of Jay. And Jay in the UK version, I forget who plays him, but he is a character who, if you were to just look at him from the outside, just from physical appearance, just from his mannerisms and stuff, he would probably be a very popular guy at school. But he takes it so far, he takes it so obnoxiously, stupidly, and with his constant lying and his constant deceit. He's played by James Buckley, that's the name. He takes it so far that he is unable to be popular, and that's what gets him into the In-Betweeners club. And that's one great subversion that I love about that character, that maybe if he toned it down just a bit, he probably would be one of the popular kids. But what you have in the In-Betweeners US is that you have this larger kid who is kind of like repulsive to be around, but it kind of misses the point of Jay. Like that kid, regardless of his behaviour in the In-Betweeners US, would never be popular, whereas Jay, I think in another parallel universe in the UK version, probably would be popular. And that's sort of the subversive, clever truths of the In-Betweeners, that if these guys were just slightly different, with the exception of Will, because I think he's a bit of a lost cause, probably would be popular in another life. And that's just one of the great things that I love about the In-Betweeners series. Off the top of my head, I can't really think of many more direct American adaptations of British TV shows. I know that they tried to Americanise Doctor Who a little bit with the 1996 TV movie, but not that much was really lost in translation. They changed the setting to San Francisco for that one story, but the Doctor was still British. He still had very British mannerisms. It was really just the setting. And with Doctor Who, they go to America all the time. So I don't know if that exactly counts, but still, that's really all of the ones that I can think of off the top of my head. But thank you for the questions, Christoph, and good luck with your English and history, and I wish you all the best in terms of maybe getting a career in TV and film. Like I said, watch that video I did. It's on my Trilbee Reviews YouTube channel. Next question comes from Dean Jones, who asks, if you had the opportunity to work on a franchise film, Marvel, Bond, etc., be it directing or writing, for example, which would it be and why? Speaking of Bond, hashtag Dean Jones for next Bond. He gave up the Doctor hashtag campaign and I was going for the next James Bond. But going to your question, in terms of working on a franchise film, you name Bond. Bond is a franchise that I love. It's a British institution. Personally, I would not have much interest in making a Bond movie. And it's one of those things where I kind of would more appreciate watching them than being a part of the production, even though I think being part of the location team for a Bond film would be one of the best jobs ever, just travelling to these wonderful exotic places and taking photos and examining what you could do with the film and locations. I think that sounds like an amazing job. And also maybe working at Pinewood Studios and creating some of the gadgets and the set building. the practical applications, I think it would be amazing to work on a Bond film. But creatively, there's not much, personally, at least right now, that I think I could bring to the table that hundreds of more qualified people, or people who have the passion to make a Bond film would. I guess what I would do if I was making a Bond film, if my arm was twisted and they said to me, Trilbee, you have to make a Bond film, or give us a plot, or give us some sort of summary or synopsis, I would make it maybe more central to MI6, and make it a more inward story, exploring the 00 hierarchy. Let's get some more 00 agents there. For a feature I wrote for geekfeed.com when I was still writing for them, I did an article saying 7 things I would like to see for the next Bond film, and one of them was giving us more 00s. For example, Charlize Theron as 004, or Idris Elba as 006, and then who knows, Daniel Craig could die at the end, or 007 could die at the end, and then Idris Elba steps up to 007, and bam, that's the ending of the film. But yeah, I would draw it more inward. Because of the massive scope and scale of the productions, I think whoever's doing the next Bond film might want to tone it down a little bit, and maybe having something, for example, let's say The Raid, or The Belka Experiment, or Dread, and have it set inside a 00 building. I think that'd be really cool. You could have something Kingsman style, where you have these agents who have to fight each other, and they're professionally trained killers surrounded by all these gadgets and surrounded by all this hardware and stuff, and they have to fight each other. That's probably what I would do for another Bond film, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a Bond film. I could, for example, steal that idea and just do another generic spy universe film and make that the plot and the setting. That's what I would do if I was doing a new Bond film. But what franchise would I like to work on if for some reason a studio came to me tomorrow and said, Trilbee, we want you to work on this franchise? If I had to adapt a franchise from the pages or from a novel or whatever to the big screen, I would adapt One Punch Man, although that could be considered cultural appropriation because that's a Japanese story and I'm not a Japanese man, obviously, or like a Japanese person, so I might not be able to do that. But in terms of actually picking up the baton from a previously established film franchise, I would go for Friday the 13th, and I'm kind of astounded that we do not have another installment in this franchise since the 2009-2010 Platinum Dunes remake, which was okay. But Jason Voorhees in a environment killing people should be one of the easiest things in the world to do, and I love that franchise. I love almost every installment, even if it's a guilty love. For example, I like about 20 minutes of Jason Takes Manhattan. I like about 10 minutes of Jason Goes to Hell, The Final Friday. And I think there's a lot to love with the first 5 installments of that franchise, even if one of the stories literally is instigated by the death of somebody because they offered someone else a chocolate bar. I think that's the 4th or the 5th one in the franchise. But yeah, I think the Friday the 13th franchise is something that I would love to have a crack at. I would love to explore. I don't really know if you would explore more of Jason's characteristics, but one aspect I really liked in the Friday the 13th remake, believe it or not, was that he would set traps and that he had a bow and arrow, he set bear traps, he was kind of a hermit in the forest, in the woods, in Crystal Lake, and he would use the knowledge of the environment to his advantage. And that he may be a stone-cold killer, but he does have some intelligence there, at least if it's just intelligence in terms of how to kill people, that's still some level of intelligence. I would love to maybe explore that aspect of the character and his creativity. So, but it is just a case of getting some teenagers together, they have premarital sex, then Jason comes in and kills them. This is not difficult, it is not a complex formula. We've had like 12 of these films if you count Freddy vs. Jason. This is, yeah, give me a crack at it, Hollywood. I mean, you're clearly not really up to the task of delivering it, so let's see if I can do it. What do you have to lose? The next question comes from Cassidy Winter, who asks, what do you think are the advantages and disadvantages of staggering release times for a film across different countries? Also, what is your perfect Sunday? What is your perfect Sunday? And for the second one, Sunday is spelt Sundae, as in a ice cream. I will answer those questions in reverse. My perfect Sunday, something with caramel or toffee. That's my perfect Sunday. Anything with that, and that we're already kind of playing with perfection there. Whatever you add on top is just cherries on top of this Sunday. Whatever you want to call it. The metaphor kind of falls apart when you are dealing with an actual Sunday. So, and what is my perfect Sunday, which I'm assuming is a reference to Hot Fuzz? probably spend the day either at the movie theatre or just at home working or editing or writing, or basically I am not myself if I'm not working. So I will be working, whether it is just watching a film, which is kind of maybe work depending on the film, or depending whether or not I'm going to do an analysis of it or a review or a podcast about it, or actually doing some editing or some writing or some filming. That is my perfect Sunday. I may be the most boring individual in the world, but that is my perfect Sunday. So the final question from Cassidy: what do you think of the advantages and disadvantages of staggering release dates? I think in a post-internet era, staggered release dates are a stupid thing to do. There's a couple of exceptions, I think, though, if you are maybe staggering the release by 1 week, or maybe 2 weeks. For example, maybe there are some school holidays that land at peak times in certain countries that are not in different countries. For example, I think that's why Pixar tend to stagger their release dates in America first and then in the UK, to try and coincide with half-term, school time, school holidays. But I still think that's a pretty dumb thing, because kids and family films, they make money all year round. I don't think just giving kids 1 week off and then releasing the film on that week is going to prevent people from seeing it anyway, because when you get to the second week for a kids film, they're still seeing it, there's still an audience there, so clearly after half term is over, they're still able to go to the movies and watch it. I don't understand why they have to prioritise half term so much. And in terms of staggered release dates, I know, for example, we've been very lucky in the UK that we do tend to get some of the Marvel films first. Whether that's being able to see Thor Ragnarok first and me being able to tell you how great it is, and then that hype sort of builds up across the internet so that it has an even bigger impact in America when it releases a week later. Or for The Amazing Spider-Man 2, where we get it a week early, we can warn you guys to stay the fuck away from that film, and then that sort of kills the hype for the American release, which thankfully is actually what it did. So staggered release dates can actually backfire like it did for The Amazing Spider-Man 2. And when it comes to staggered release dates, when you are dealing with releasing the film in non-English speaking countries and you're dubbing and you're putting subtitles, then fair enough if you want to release a film in China a couple of weeks or a couple of months later. I think as long as you release it in a territory that speaks the same language at the same time, for example a UK and a US release date at the same time, you minimise piracy, because then if a film is released, let's say for example Rough Night, I don't remember the exact release dates off the top of my head, but that came out early, like late spring, early summertime in the US. By the time it was released in the UK, you could download HD pirated torrents of that film, and maybe people who were hyped for that film, I don't know who is hyped for Rough Night, but that's just the example off the top of my head, maybe they just decided to pirate it instead. The internet is accessible in basically almost every single household. If people want to pirate it, they're going to pirate it. So by the time Rough Night comes out in the UK, probably the people who wanted to see it in the UK might have already seen it, and then the fact that the word of mouth that was for Rough Night was not particularly good means that the anticipation dies down, and then dies down further by not even releasing that film for another 3 or 4 months after the fact. And that's another case for why you should not stagger release dates, because the internet is universal. So what you do is that you watch a trailer and you say, oh, that film looks really, really good. I'm really looking forward to seeing that. What's that release date? February 15th. Okay, I'm really looking forward to seeing this film come out on February 15th. And then while the months build up and then you get close to that February release date, you see the marketing ramp up. You see more trailers on YouTube. You see more banners on your website. You see more stuff, and you can't wait to see this film on February 15th. Then February comes around. Oh wait, this film is not coming out in the UK until May. Oh, but I'm still seeing the February marketing campaign, because even though I am not in the country where the film is opening in February, I'm still seeing all of this promotion. Then the film comes out in February, I cannot watch it. After a month, that marketing dies down, because you're on the internet and that film's primary release location has already come and gone. You are not seeing adverts and trailers for that anymore, because the internet is universal and goes everywhere. And then by the time the May release comes around, you may have forgotten the film exists. And then, let's say, middle or the end of June, you're thinking, oh, that film is actually out. I didn't even know it was out, because I've not seen any marketing for it on the website or the YouTube videos that I frequent. Oh, they're not even showing it anymore, because no one went to see the film, because no one knew it was coming out here, so I can't attend a screening anymore. It's those things. staggered release dates, maybe at most a week or two, at the absolute most. But I think in a post-internet world, staggered release dates need to go the way of the dodo. I think unless they are hopping continents to different speaking languages, they need to go. I think it's such an antiquated thing that studios kind of cling on to, and then when they release them in all territories at the exact same time and they have a record-breaking opening, then even if the opening figures aren't amazing, because they all add up to a big number because they've opened in all territories at the exact same time, you can get a positive headline out of that. For example, The Mummy, when it opened, it was able to boast a big opening weekend number because it opened in so many territories, so they didn't just have to run with the it disappoints in the US story. They can say it performed very well worldwide story. It's good business, it looks good, and it's good for the consumer just to have one solitary release date, at least for that particular language. I think for English-speaking countries, it should be a day-and-date release date. I think they should not stagger it. I think it's stupid, completely stupid. And when you have, for example, The Amazing Spider-Man 2, which is terrible, and the plot ending you can see coming from a mile away, there were still what people consider to be significant spoilers at the end of that film. And what happens is that it gets released in the UK, a pretty small territory, especially when compared to America. And then English-speaking audiences are able to leak out all of these spoilers for the American viewers who speak the same language, and then they have the ending of the film that they are potentially hyped for spoilt for them. It is stupid and should not be done. Like, I know people, even for Thor Ragnarok, people have been spoiled at the ending of the film, even though the film has not actually come out in their territory yet, because we had the release date first. I'm grateful we get to see it before the US, but I don't want to deprive people of their anticipation, deprive people of their joy that a film like Thor Ragnarok can bring, and deprive them of being surprised because they had something spoiled for them online, because it's easy to say, turn off your internet, turn off your Wi-Fi, don't go on these websites. For people like me, it's my job to go online. I even if I was not doing the online work or the blogging or the podcasting and stuff, I still need to go online to find media work and to find the jobs that I do outside of YouTube. I can't just turn off the internet, otherwise I'm bloody unemployed. But anyway, that's just me being ranted. That's a rant that's been long in coming. I'm sorry to take it out on you, Cassidy. You've asked a perfectly valid question, but hopefully I gave you what I can at least account to be a balanced argument for or against staggered release dates. So thank you for your question, Cassidy. The next question comes from Daniel Morrison, who asks, any comic book properties yet to get their big screen debut that you'd like to see get adapted into a movie, and if you had the opportunity to adapt one yourself, what would it be and why? This may include properties that have been adapted before. For me, the comic book property that I've always wanted to work on or adapt or be a part of has been an Incredible Hulk comic book movie. I love the character. He's my favourite comic book character. I love the animated series that he had in the early 90s and the mid-90s. I love the Incredible Hulk movie, Ang Lee's Hulk, I can take it or leave it, and I love his appearances in the Avengers films and of course in Thor Ragnarok, which he was really good, but in my opinion pretty underutilised him. The Hulk, I think, is a fascinating character and a great modernisation of the Jekyll and Hyde science and monster movie tropes. I think it's a very incredibly well-rounded character that is ripe for big screen exploration, but I can completely understand why many filmmakers or why the Marvel Studios have been trying to hold back the Hulk in regards to not having his own solo film, because he's a bit of a walking, talking contradiction in terms of why people go to the movies. The character of Bruce Banner does not want to turn into the Hulk, however the only reason the audience are there to watch the film is to see the Hulk, so you are dealing with a bit of a contradiction here. But I think that it can still be done incredibly well. I have images in my head for what an opening sequence for a Hulk movie could be, or maybe a Hulk short film or something. I think there's some great imagery to be mined from the property. I think Louis Leterrier, who directed the 2008 Incredible Hulk film, was able to tap into that sort of almost Greek myth in terms of the shot where he takes the helicopter down and he covers Betty Ross as the helicopter comes crashing down. That looks like it's something that could be etched in stone or etched at the side of a vase or a vase for some sort of Greek pottery. It's a great and iconic tableau in my opinion, and when he tries to fight the thunder by throwing the rock at it, there's some great opportunities both visually and thematically to be mined for that character. and he's my favourite. Me trying not to and ah is making my throat dry up quite quickly, and I don't know why that is, but it's a incredibly, there's so much material here, whether or not there is the Red Hulk arc, or whether there is World War Hulk, or is it called Banner No More? When the two actually do separate, or when they manage to at least keep Banner inside the Hulk's head, so it's just the Hulk through and through, or Hulk Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. There's even the Grey Hulk Mr. Fix-It storyline where he becomes something akin to a mob boss, and I think there's so much material to be mined there. I wouldn't go so far as say that the Hulk Agents of Smash TV series, which I've not watched but I've seen clips of, where there's 20 Hulks of different variations. There's Blue Hulk, there's Red Hulk, there's Green Hulk, and then they've got the She-Hulk variants. I'm not particularly interested in She-Hulk in regards to just being a typical action film. I think if you're going to do a She-Hulk film, it would be a cross between what's the comparison? Bridget Jones meets Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney, where you do have this female figure who is the Hulk, basically, but she is also a working defense attorney. And that is some of the best She-Hulk writing, where she's a character who can actually break the fourth wall, akin to Deadpool, and she also works as a lawyer. Those are some really interesting stories, and something that you probably would not find in any other comic book franchise. So let's try and adapt the Hulk family. Let's adapt Hulk and She-Hulk separately, and maybe bring them together, or they cross over and have cameos and stuff like that. But that is the comic book property that I would love to personally adapt myself, and that is something that I would love to see that Marvel Studios explore. If they explore the character a lot more, then it kind of takes the load off my back, because then I won't be needing to adapt it in the near future. But let's see what they do with that character. Let's see what they do, because I think there's so much potential there. The next question comes from regular patron favourite Anne Neubauer, who asks, what do you think of the old 1950s and 60s low-budget horror and sci-fi films known for their poor quality and production values, acting and or science? I'm thinking of films like those by Ed Wood and titles like The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, that sort of thing. These films seem to be the opposite of what you advocate in terms of taste and intelligence, yet these films have a following and are just plain fun. My main question is this: do you see a niche in Britain, as there is in the US, of current non-mainstream filmmakers reproducing these styles of these films in new productions? My boyfriend and I recently enjoyed Where Skeeto, Nazi Hunter, filmed locally in 2016 by Christopher Mim, where Skeeto, like a werewolf, but the guy turns into a giant mosquito. So, thank you for the very thorough question, and thank you for recommending a film to me that I now feel like I need to watch immediately. Where Skeeto, Nazi Hunter. That just sounds like the best. You know what? Right now, I'm going to react to that trailer. I've just googled it and now it's on YouTube. Let's watch it together. I found Where Skeeto, Nazi Hunter trailer. It's the 1 minute and 16 second one. Let's all watch it together. 3, 2, 1, press play. State Euphoria. Whoa! A brave soldier captured and transformed by sinister science. Freed from his bonds, he seeks revenge. Oh my god! Where Skeeto, Nazi Hunter. New Berlin, unincorporated. By day, the face of a man. But at the sight of blood. He actually cuts his own... Oh, the blood's red, even though it's a black and white film. He becomes a blood-sucking demon with a craving for vengeance. There's not even a transformation. They just cut away and he's now wearing a mask. That's amazing. Oh my god, that's the best thing I've ever seen. That's an actual film. Oh my goodness, that looks amazing. Anyway, yeah, those low-budget films from 50s and 60s, they are, of course, I would not by any measure call them objectively good, but there is still value to be found in just such earnest earnest work. Like, for example, Ed Wood, even though these films are terrible, you just feel the passion in that he really, really is trying to make these things good. Whereas with many of, let's say, The Asylum with Transmorphers or Sharknado and stuff like that, they're trying to be so tongue-in-cheek that you can't really laugh at the joke because they're trying way too hard to be funny and trying too hard to be bad. The fun and the camp comes from the absolute earnestness in which the filmmaker approaches the topic and approaches the film. But in regards to the niche in Britain, one issue with British filmmaking is that because films by their very nature are so high budgeted to make, even some of the smaller films, they require a very large crew of people. They require some very skilled and talented individuals in order to make them, in order just to coordinate these massive productions. If they're going to be made, they have to count. They have to basically make every single one count. And even, for example, a very small British film that came out a few months ago called Hampstead, even though that is not going to be making a big splash internationally and probably will never make its money back, it's got the type of prestige talent involved that could even maybe generate some BAFTA buzz or some independent awards buzz for maybe Brendan Gleeson, who's the lead actor in that, and I forget who he's acting alongside. But Hampstead, that's the film. Brendan Gleeson, because that's based off of that's based off a true story as well. You find a lot of films in the UK based off of true stories. Hampstead stars Diane Keaton and Brendan Gleeson. Diane Keaton is the person who I was thinking of. But what they do is that they want to maybe, even though it's a low-budget film, it's not going to make a lot of money because it's going to be predominantly UK, even though I think Hampstead was a English-German co-production, is that they do want to maybe give it a BAFTA awards push to get some notoriety in order to maybe actually get some prestige to the UK film industry, and then they promote the talent internationally. Whereas if you were to make these low-budget sci-fi genre films akin to a Sharknado or a Transmorpher, you'll get a film that probably will not make a lot of money, but will also not get much sort of consideration from any sort of awards or any sort of prestigious organisation, which may sound completely snobby, and that's because it absolutely is. But what you get with UK film productions, you occasionally do get one which is a big co-production with an American company, and it does wind up being a pretty big financial hit for the UK film industry, and also whichever co-production that it was a part of. For example, the Harry Potter series, and also Paddington and Paddington 2, which releases next Friday, and that looks really good, and that's had really, really good reviews. However, those are absolutely the exception to the rule. With the UK film industry, with their independent films, the people making them are more after the art of the business in terms of making a film that is well received and also promotes undiscovered talent, and also in way of them being an investment. For example, a UK film might not be able to make any money, but it can invest in a future star. It can invest in someone who was previously undiscovered or is making their way through the indie film circuit and is doing very good work on screen or off screen as maybe a director or a writer or an actor or an actress, and then what they do is that they make a film to sort of promote that individual or group of individuals so that they can be a part of more bigger Hollywood co-productions, which is where the real money is. So the UK film industry are more interested in future investments and also prestige, and unfortunately with the 50s and 60s low-budget films such as Where Skeeto, Nazi Hunter, which I'm sure is an amazing film, which had an amazing trailer, and I'm sure was completely made from the heart and with the best of intentions, a film like that is unfortunately neither of those things. It is why in the UK, with the exception of Harry Potter, but that maybe does not count because that was a massive co-production with Warner Brothers and American studios and stuff like that, and American producers, why you do not see Pacific Rim or Iron Man or anything outside, or those type of $200 million blockbuster films made in this country. You do get, for example, the James Bond franchise. However, once again, it may be a British property, but it is an American co-production, and Bond kind of like transcends territories at this point. So what you get with the lower a budget a film is, the harder it is in order to get it out there into the wider world, because you need a marketing budget. And just by its very nature, you're not really going to find that, especially in the UK, because they're going to be wanting something that they could sell to international markets as well, for example, like Harry Potter and Paddington. So I may be kind of like elaborating on what is maybe a much more complex, or maybe even a simpler issue than I'm making it, but I believe that's kind of the understanding. They're after future investments for talent and also prestige, and unfortunately these low-budget B-movie homages to the 50s and 60s, or something like The Asylum's Transmorphers or Sharknado, there's just there's too much money to be lost on something that will give them relatively little gain, even in the long or the short term. So that is my understanding of how the industry approaches these types of films, at least in the UK. In the US, where they kind of do have money to burn and can maybe write some of these films off as a tax write-off, then there's a much more of a market for it. So the next question comes from Edward Sweet, who asks, what would you do during a zombie apocalypse? This question is in 3 parts. What would be your survival plans? What are some of the creative ways you would kill zombies? And what stuff would you do knowing that there would be no one to stop you? So, like many people, I got my zombie apocalypse survival training from the Dead Rising video game series. So the first port of call for me would be to go to a shopping centre or a shopping mall. But however, for me, where I live, the nearest shopping mall is about a 40 to 50 minutes walk away. So I would probably have to settle for something more akin to a supermarket or maybe a corner shop. And I think the corner shop might be a good way to go, because if everyone is having the same idea as me, after all, I'm assuming even if we've not seen the film, we kind of know about, is it Dawn of the Dead or Day of the Dead, where they go into the shopping mall? It's the film that Dead Rising is tangentially inspired by. So if everyone's going to a shopping centre or a shopping mall, then maybe the corner shop might be a more incognito way to go, because then you're sort of you can put the shutters down, you've got a lot of processed food with you and a load of processed drinks, and including a few essentials and amenities like a couple of toiletries and some. And you got your drinks and you've got your hygiene products if you need them and stuff like that. So you could actually, with 1 or 2 people holed up in a corner shop, you probably could survive for a very long time. And you could always use some of the supplies in the back of the shop to maybe arm yourself if you were to make a move to another shop or make your move somewhere else, or if you just wanted to escape the shop and just chance it outside. So that would be my initial day 1 survival plan. Okay, the zombies have attacked and they're rising from the graves. Let's get to the nearest corner shop. So the creative ways I would kill zombies, I don't know if I would be the killing type. I would probably just haul up in said corner shop with the shutters down and eat Cheetos until the storm died down, or at least until most of the killing was already done and everything. So, but in terms of creative ways I'd kill zombies, what I would do is that, because I would want to try and avoid direct zombie to human confrontation, because I'm a bit of a coward for violence. So I would have to set up Home Alone style traps just in case a zombie did manage to break into the corner shop, whether they got in through a window or if they were able to somehow force their way through the shutters. I would have a series of traps. I don't quite know what the traps would be. Maybe I would drink something out of a glass bottle, and in order to live, and then I would use the shards of the glass bottle to maybe be on part of a pulley system, so the window opens, and then that cuts a piece of string, and then a broken glass bottle swings into the window and then just gets them straight in the head, and then hopefully they fall from the window if they did climb up, or if maybe someone, a looter or something, was trying to get into the building and try and kill me or eat me. So I like how the human looter in this scenario is someone who would also eat me and not just one of the zombies. So I would probably try and avoid confrontation, but I would use the supplies around me to set up traps. But even that could backfire. What if it's just an innocent person wanting to get into the shop? I don't know, but maybe it's every man for themselves. And what stuff would I do knowing there'd be no one to stop me? I'd probably, if I did manage to find my way into a supermarket or into a shopping mall, I'd probably just hoard one of the tech shops for a load of gadgets and a load of DVDs and Blu-rays, and I would just have massive movie nights. That's probably, I'm the most boring zombie survivor ever, but that's probably what I would do. I have no interest in looting or raping or pillaging or whatever. That's not me. I would rather just sort of enjoy the amenities around me, especially if I didn't have to pay for them. I'd go to a gadget shop. I'd go to one of those, I think it's called Red 5, one of those gadget shops where it's full of amazing cool stuff that you always go in to look at, but you never actually buy. No one, does that shop make any money? So I'd just go in there and like have fun with all of the drones and the helicopters and the remote controlled cars and the useless tat. And also setting up traps. I'd go to the Lego shop and I'd set up like just a load of sharp, broken Lego blocks everywhere, so the zombies would just stub their toes and they'd fall over and die on the Lego blocks. That's probably what I'd do. What I would try and do is that if we're a group of survivors in a shopping mall, I'll try and make it a more communal experience. Let's try and make things fun. Let's try and increase and boost morale. What we do is that we have big movie nights. One of the big shopping centres near where I live in Manchester, is the Trafford Centre. They've got an Odeon cinema. They've got a big HMV. They've got some TV shops. We set up movie nights like every other night or once a week or something, depending on what the long-term plan here is. So what we do is that we have movie nights, but what we don't show zombie films, like just basically to avoid relapses or to avoid any traumatic experiences. For example, how they don't show films like United 93 or Sully or Flight on in-flight movies. Like they don't show films revolving around plane crashes or plane hijackings on planes. So that might be I think that's quite a sensible thing to do. So in the heart of a zombie apocalypse, we do not show zombie apocalypse movies. So that's probably what I do. I would try and bring people together through the power of movies by using all the wonderful amenities around me to show everyone the joy of movies, and then I'd host a film club and I'd keep the Film Brits podcast going and bring on guests and talk about the movie that we just watched. Let's try and have business as usual, but it's more communal and inside a shopping centre. And if the zombies happen to break in, I hope everyone else is prepared, because I'm just going to be here watching all 7 or 8 seasons of Park and Recreations that I stole from HMV. So the final question for the podcast comes from Jude Holmes 42. What do you think of the Monk trilogy from Series 10? I'm assuming they mean the Monk trilogy, the Doctor Who stories Extremis, The Pyramid at the End of the World, and The Lie of the Land from Doctor Who Series 10. Now, I have not seen these stories since they first broadcast, so I've not seen them since June 2017, about 3 or 4 months ago. So I do not have the best recollection of what my opinion was on those stories, or actually what happened in those stories, but from what I remember, Extremis was a bit of a waste of time. Extremis spent a very long time explaining what's a relatively simple what's a relatively simple concept in terms of the world being a simulation. They go so far and they explain so thoroughly that this is a simulation that they just waste everybody's time, because they just go through it so thoroughly and so obnoxiously, in my opinion. I do like how they kind of built upon the foundation set in Oxygen, which in my opinion is a better story than this trilogy, where the Doctor is blind and he has to sort of deal with an invasion while he is visually incapacitated. But when he is wearing his sunglasses, it means we kind of lose the expression that Peter Capaldi is very well known for. Like, he's a very expressive, great actor, but with the sunglasses on, because he's blind, we lose a lot of that. The Pyramid at the End of the World is okay. And I think the two-pronged narrative of the bacteria in the biochemical lab, and also the pyramid appearing in Russia, I think that's an effective way to tell a story, but once again it does feel a bit too long. And The Lie of the Land is the first 10-15 minutes where it's Bill and Nardole trying to find the Doctor, and then they have that big confrontation. It turns out maybe the Doctor is on the side of the monks. Was very well done, but the whole regeneration fake-out was so abysmally cheap. It lacked complete impact. It's really frustrating, in my opinion. I was just not a fan of that at all. And then you have the ending of the story, where I can't even remember how that happens. They kind of do the same ending as Closing Time. As a trilogy, it probably didn't need to be a trilogy. Maybe it had to be 2 episodes. And while the conceit and the premise was good, and the monks were visually interesting and quite creepy, when you dedicate 3 episodes out of it's a quarter of the season to this one single story, I'm expecting a lot more from it. I'm expecting something more thematically interesting. I'm expecting something more interesting for our main characters to do, apart from just complain about stuff. It's kind of ho-hum nothing trilogy. But the fact that it made up a quarter of what is Peter Capaldi's final season, and he wasn't even able to act properly in it, was a massive disappointment in my opinion. So it's a decent trilogy, and in terms of the curse of lowered expectations, it's some of Stephen Moffat's better stuff in season 10, but, barely. So it's an okay trilogy. I just think when you dedicate nearly 2.5 hours to a story, there's a lot more to it, and I think they kind of wasted a lot of series 10 in order to just tell this one singular story. So I'm not adverse to longer multi-episode arcs, even beyond a two-parter. I'm all for changing the structure of a series in order to make things more interesting and to liven things up, but when you are wasting that much time, I kind of expect something a bit more at the end of the day. So I will need to rewatch those stories, and one day I will give them my in-depth thoughts and opinions and reactions and reviews and stuff, but today I'm really just dealing with my initial impressions that are about 3 or 4 months old, so take it with a grain of salt. The opinion may change on repeat viewings. So thank you so much to all the patrons who have managed to get in touch with me and gave me something much lighter and much more fun to talk about in the wake of all this depressing news. I think I only ummed and ahed a couple of times throughout the course of it. My mouth is feeling really dry and my cheeks really, really hurt. I'm guessing me umming and ahhing kind of stretches my mouth out to talk more freely, and it's kind of hurting my mouth to not do that. It's really frustrating. But if you would like to become a patron of the Film Brits podcast and get your questions and topics submitted, as well as also get a potential voice acting role in Before He Wakes, the short film that I'm currently in the middle of making, then be sure to go on www.patreon.com/Trilbee. Be sure to follow me on Twitter at Trilbee Reviews. Be sure to follow me on Facebook at Mr. TARDIS Reviews. I'm aware that my website Trilbee.com is kind of inaccessible at the moment. There have been some WordPress updates that have broken the site, so the people who designed the site are currently working on it and hopefully going to be fixing it in the near future. But in the meantime, I hope you guys have a wonderful week. Happy November, and I shall see you folks next time.